Good morning, and welcome to another horrific episode of Diatribes from the Voice of Doom. And now here's your harbinger of horror, Voice of Doom. Hello. It's Sunday morning, 12:39 a.m. Not much going on, but I decided I feel like I need to do another one. And just be sarcastic and comment on what hasn't been going on. It's really weird because in America we have the weekend, and I mean, most of the places I lived in have been 24/7 places, so you don't really think of the weekend, but you always think of the weekend as the time when we relax and take a couple of days off and get ready for the week. The old 9 to 5, Monday through Friday that they used to do back in the 50s. But we don't anymore. We have to work any number of days, and we don't really treat the weekend like we used to, but we do think that Saturday and Sunday is, downtime. Okay, now, how that translated into an international global phenomena is beyond me. But I've noticed over the years that there's really not much going on in the other parts of the world either. So I guess Saturday and Sunday are downtime for the Hutus and the Houthis and the, Uyghurs and whoever else is suffering calamity. It's just like, okay, it's Saturday and Sunday. You never see any big news on the weekend. It's really weird. Like 9/11 was on a Tuesday, if I remember correctly, and just the major calamity. Well, all right, Sunday morning was not 9/11. December 7th, 1941 was on a Sunday morning, so they knew how to do it. Let's have a surprise attack when they're least expecting it. They're all getting up for their Sunday brunch, and all of a sudden, all hell's breaking loose. But I still wanted to do a diatribe. And my theme today is disparate and not really cohesive. I wanted to talk about a lot of things that I saw, and I wanted to rant and rave and rail about how all these so-called news people are, scampering around trying to catch up with what I've already said and already known for decades. But I've said it, and they're all catching up. And I wonder about their political acumen. And they have radio talk shows, national radio talk shows, and they have news shows on, a major network. And I wonder how they manage to do that because they don't seem to know much. Like, for instance, I was listening to the radio and they were talking about, well, if Petri dish were to be impeached, then that would make that gargoyle, Kamala, or however she wants to pronounce her name, president, and Nancy Pelosi would be vice president. And then if we got rid of Kamala, then Pelosi would be vice president. Well, if you guys have been on the planet long enough and seen history, you would realize that's not how it works, okay? And I'll explain to you how it works. You don't have some sort of a row of people waiting in line to become president and become, now you're out, now you're in. No. Nixon, Richard Milhouse, in case you don't know, resigned under pressure. And if it was this day and age, he wouldn't have even bothered doing anything because he wouldn't have, nothing was wrong according to the government standards. Back in the early 70s, there was a lot of corruption in the government, and the press decided they were going to press. And they found out, and they figured it out, and they put more pressure on Milhouse. And it was finally like, we can't even say the Democrats are putting pressure. I mean, the Republicans said, you got to go because this is getting out of hand. So he resigned. And after he resigned, the vice president who he chose after Spiro Agnew had to resign in disgrace for corruption, Milhouse chose another vice president. It was Gerald R. Ford, okay? So he was the first appointed president in history. He was never elected to office. I mean, he was elected to be a senator, yes, a congressman. I think he was a senator. But he was chosen to be vice president. Now, when Milhouse resigned, Gerald Ford became president, and he chose Nelson Rockefeller to be the vice president. He was probably told to choose Rockefeller because Rockefeller was part of the upper echelon of people that could babysit Gerald Ford, who had no idea what he was doing, and he was totally ineffectual. And everyone knew his days would be numbered because no one was going to vote for a Republican after Watergate. And that was just the way it was. So they could get any peanut farmer or any idiot liberal, know nothing, elected to office in 1976. That was when I graduated. So I was right in the middle of it. I don't look back on history. I was in history. Now, you don't just say, oh, next in line is the Speaker of the House and next in line is the Secretary of State. No. They choose. So if Petri dish were to be impeached, then Kamala would choose her vice president. And God knows who she'd choose. But that would be the succession of power. And then they could all be dealt with one by one. But I find it amusing to watch these so-called political touts talk about, Nancy Pelosi will be president. Come on. You don't know anything. But I wanted to get that out of the way, and I also wanted to talk about this woke business coming back to bite them on the butt. And that happens every time throughout history. If you look at history, the true revolutionaries end up being hoisted on their own petard. It happens every time. French Revolution, Robespierre, executed. He was one of the main guys in the French Revolution, and he lost favor. He fell out of favor. And then he ended up having his head cut off. That's another example. Well, the American Revolution was basically, Thomas Paine put out Common Sense and put out some tracts that explained why America should be free and independent. Well, what happened to Thomas Paine? He was ousted. He was vilified, and he was a mess. He was, they always get rid of the main people. So it's good that this wokism is starting to come back and bite the very people that espoused it on their ass. Now, Whoopi Goldberg, in my opinion, didn't say anything particularly wrong. She was mixing up race or physical characteristics with a culture or I don't know how you'd call it, just a group of people that aren't particularly one race or another. So she was confused in a way. And I don't think she was confused because I know she has a brain. I don't agree with anything she says, but I think has a brain. And she was chastised. She was told, you said something wrong and now people don't like it. Now we'll have to get rid of you. And that's the way it is all the time. These people that want to cancel because they don't agree with whatever philosophy these people have, and if you hear what they have to say, then it's going to confuse people. So just don't let them talk. But I remember Whoopi, it's probably about 1970, it was late 70s, and she came wandering out on the stage, and she was very skinny back then, and she was edgy, and she was something new. And she kind of took the world by storm. I remember everybody was like, oh, this chick is different, man. She's a former heroin addict, and her stand-up is a little bit different. She's kind of in there with, what's his name from Taxi, whatever his name is. I don't remember his name. I didn't plan this. The Man in the Moon. He was an edgy comedian, and Whoopi was an edgy comedian, and she got big, and she did movies, and they were reasonably good, and I like her as a performer. I don't mind her at all. But she said something wrong, and then now she's all mad because she's not canceled, but, she's suffering the slings and arrows of their own idiocy. Now, I will say, since I'm just going to talk culture right now, I'm not going to talk about politics because it's the weekend. But I will say that most of the liberals that are total idiots, I kind of like their work. I mean, I like Alec Baldwin. He's done good stuff. If you want to check out something good, watch Nuremberg. It's really good. And he produced it and starred it, and I think he directed, I don't know, but it was good. And he's always been very funny. And Robert De Niro, I always liked in the 70s. He was a brilliant actor, brilliant, till he got typecast. But his politics is kind of up his ass. He doesn't know anything. And he's just a victim of past lifetimes that he hates a certain person and he doesn't really know why. Now, another liberal that I kind of admire, believe it or not, is Madonna. Because she's talented. She writes good songs. And everybody said she'd never make it, and she said, I'll show you. And she did. And her songwriting ability is very good. And her performance, whatever. I'm not into all that, twerking or sexuality on stage. I don't need that. Just want to hear the music. And I also heard, since everybody's going at each other tooth and nails and tongs and, whatever. Neil Young and Joni Mitchell don't want to be on Spotify because of Joe Rogan's disinformation and misinformation about actually asking a question about common sense. Because they're dangerous, because they're not, they're putting suspicion on the serum, and we can't do that. Well, we're finding out about the serum, aren't we? You look around and we're finding out. But Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, well, I never liked Neil Young. He was all right as a upper soprano in Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. That was good stuff. But as a solo performer, never cared for him. Joni Mitchell, I heard a lot of these people, they're Xers. They don't know anything, basically, because all they know is, Blink 45 or whatever the hell it is. And, like, Joni Mitchell, she's terrible. It's like, are you kidding me? You don't know anything, because if you knew Joni Mitchell, you know she's a genius, and she's probably the single best female composer in history. And I know that for a fact, so don't argue with me. So whatever her politics is, that's fine. But I'm just enjoying seeing the wokesters waking up to how bad the situation is that they caused. And I hope they all get canceled because the conflagration is coming. And this is a long diatribe, and I said nothing. It's ridiculous. That was the most boring diatribe I've ever done. But I wanted to do a little comment on waking up to a nightmare, being awoken to a nightmare, because you see what's going to happen. We're all going to be canceled soon. And I've already told you why. But I wanted to say a few dribs and drabs about these people, because even though they don't know anything and their politics is up their ass, they're still talented, and I still admire them. I give them props. I'm fair. Why can't everybody be fair? The wokesters won't be fair. You say something wrong, you're done. But I'm fair, and I'll say, even though I don't agree with you, I like what you've done. I'll leave it at that. It's almost 70 minutes. This is the most ridiculous thing. It's the longest one I've ever done, and I said nothing. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry I wasted your time. But think about it, and we'll talk more about this wokesterism later when the shit really hits. Good morning.